Before we go into some other things I want to chat about, I want to round out some of the other contributing factors. Where does weather rank on this list? Is it, whether it be rain, snow, ice, dark, sudden darkness or cloud, like how much does that contribute?
So I'm going to just drop a small bomb here for a minute about something, and then to answer the question, then we'll come back to it whenever you're ready. But NHTSA did a study, came out in 2015, that showed in the chain of events, the last event before a crash, that 94% of the time it's a human choice or error. Okay, and that's my language, human choice or error. So then the question is, what are the other 6%? Well, 2% are vehicle defects, 2% are the environment, 2% other. And so to your question, the environment is both the physical environment, potholes, road conditions, etc., and then things like weather. And so again, it's a chain
So
of
it's
events.
virtually nothing. It's virtually nothing.
Not a lot.
Saying.
That's right. So
Yeah.
that does happen, but it's going to be small compared to the other. And again, we can talk a little more about the 94% because there's been some controversy about that number, but that's a soapbox for me. You got to be ready to get into that one.
Well, let's say more about that then. So where's the controversy around that? Are there people who are arguing that it's that number is too high, that's overstating it?
What's interesting is nobody's actually addressed the number. And so, and again, you'll tell me where you want me to, okay, that's enough of that, Mark. Let's go on to something else. But let me just start. This is why a crash is not an accident. Okay? A crash is preventable. Mm-hmm. An accident implies it's inevitable. And most people don't know this, but the word accident started getting used mostly in occupational environments, like the work setting, in the 20s and 30s when companies didn't want any responsibility of on-the-job injuries and deaths. Oh, that was an accident. I always say it's like it was an act of God. It was unintentional. Nobody could do whatever. And part of the reason I bring that up is because if you believe in safety, that by investigating, you can determine the causal and contributory factors and then intervene in some way by changing, right? So you prevent it from reoccurring, you prevent whatever, then that's what safety's about. It's a crash, right? And if you didn't believe in that and you really think it's an accident that's inevitable, why are you trying to make changes, investigating, et cetera? No. And that's the mission of the NTSB, investigate those crashes to make recommendations so they don't reoccur, okay? So what's interesting is there's two elements to this. One is, as a NASA scientist, pretty much you could start any paper with 70, because it was so well established, 70 to 80% of incidents, that pyramid we were talking about, 70, 80% were human factors related. It was just a given after all this research and things that were going on. The Institute of Medicine report, right? To err is human, 100,000 medical errors every year due to human, et cetera. And so it always surprised me, it's like 94% shouldn't actually surprise anybody. But there is something which I call safety misdirection. And that's where two things are going on. One, denial. Like, let's not deny what the causal or contributory factor was. And the other is blame. And so the old version of safety misdirection is, the car companies are just blaming the drivers for stuff. Okay? And they want to sort of, avoid, it's kind of like the corporate accident language, right? It's like, let's get away from that. And so I always point out that what I learned at the NTSB is you can have safety or you can have blame. If you want to blame people or that's not going to get you to the safety. The safety part is identifying the causal and contributory factors and then intervening so those things don't happen again. Which, by the way, even if it's the human, then very often, as we've already discussed, there's a different intervention like technology, which our society happens to turn to a lot, right? When it's something about our human behavior that's hard to change, well, what's the technology we might be able to use that either supports, helps, or just eliminates the ability to do that, okay? So that's one of the things, the controversial part that's been interesting is people saying, well, if you talk about 94%, you're just trying to blame the drivers, et cetera. Now, there are some car companies and some people in the autonomous vehicle space that love to do that. So it's, again, how they use the data. But scientifically, a huge part of this is human choice or error. Then we still have the challenge of then how do we address those, right, to make sure those things don't reoccur again in another place. So again, it's a little bit of a soapbox for me when I, hear about people like, oh, that 94% has been, it's like, no, it's not. Nobody's actually argued about the number. I think it's more the blame and shame part, which again, doesn't get you safety no matter what, right? So you can't deny what the sources are and blaming people. In fact, nowadays it's like, oh, you're just blaming the driver. Then they point and they start blaming the car, they blame the software, they blame that's still not going to get things fixed for you. So you're going to save lives. So there you go. I'm with the 94% and think that, that other 6% shows that last event in the chain is a very small percent. It's going to be weather or potentially defects.
Okay. I don't know if you will have this statistic, but while we're on the topic of cause and fault, we talk about nearly 50,000 people a year died last year. Do we know how many of those people were the people who were the cause of the mistake that led to the crash versus people who were presumably not doing anything that would have led to a mistake?
We don't have that level of detail of those specific crashes that occurred to be able to tell that.
And the reason I'm asking, by the way, is to sort of make the point that there are two elements to this. There is, what can I do as a driver to make sure I'm not the one who makes the mistake? And then what can I do as a driver to make sure that when the other driver makes the mistake, I'm in a position to react better or see their mistake before it's happening? And I think about this a lot as a dad who is starting to talk a lot about this to his daughter, right? If I'm driving her to school, just ask her. It's a nonstop lecture. It's, hey, Olivia, did you see how I did that? Did you notice why I did that? Why did I look there? Did you see what that driver just did? And so I guess what I'm assuming is that we have to be vigilant on both fronts. It's not enough to just say, I'm going to drive at a responsible speed and I'm not going to hold my phone and I'm not going to drink. I think that that's a great first step. I don't think it's the complete step. You have to assume this is the mantra I use, Mark. And my wife thinks this is a little grotesque, but I don't care. I say it to her all the time. I say, I want you to imagine that somebody woke up today with the stated purpose of killing you. So they've been handed an envelope. The envelope contains your name, and they're told to kill you today. But here's the catch. They're not allowed to use a gun. They're not allowed to poison you. They have to do it with their car. So I said, armed with that knowledge, how would you drive different today? It's only one car. You're going to see thousands of cars today. It's only one, but there is someone out here who's trying to kill you. They're being paid to kill you. What will that knowledge do to your attention? And how will you treat each intersection, each on-ramp, each off-ramp, each T-joint, all of those things that we talk about. And honestly, I don't know that that's a great way to go living your life. It's a bit morose, but it's the only heuristic I've come up with to help with the other half of the equation. That's why I asked the question, right? I don't know how to quantify the effect size of each of these things. Is it worth the baggage and the overhead, the emotional overhead of playing that game?
Could be your life. So yeah. It's worth it. And I said this at the beginning, which is thank you for bringing this topic up, because at the core, like you say, your mantra of what's under your control, what's out of your control, that's what we're talking about here. But even the things that are out of your control, you can be more vigilant to some of the risk factors or other things that you could do. At the higher conceptual level, I would say, and maybe just a slight sort of reworking exactly what you said, but part of this is situational awareness. SA,
yeah,
which we know, this in racing. It's a big thing in aviation. And I think it's what you just literally articulated with your daughter, right? Did you see how I looked at that? Did you see that car over there doing whatever? So I think that is huge. And the second part is what we would typically frame as defensive driving. And so it's a little different than what you portrayed, but it is the same thing actually, which is there are people that are out here that are not making the good choices you are, but who are on their phone or drunk or haven't had enough sleep. You don't have any control over that. But with your situational awareness and driving defensively, there are things you can do, right? So besides scanning here, looking there, you can come back again. You can look at those intersections where you know things are higher, so that if that raises your vigilance, that could be enough for you just to pause at that stop sign longer, and it becomes not even an error, let alone a near miss or worse, right? And so I think, that's what you're portraying. The situational awareness includes following the rules, doing the good, and then the other is the defensive driving part is don't think everyone else is doing the same thing.
Right.
They're not, right? And I would just say, whether they're intending to get you or not, those bad choices are going on. Those errors are going on. And so, yeah, I think that's actually a great way to approach it. And I think, unfortunately, it's so easy to drive nowadays. A lot of folks, especially with even newer technologies, some people have their heads so far out of the game, they've lost the situational awareness, right? It's all about the music, the conversation, etc. So all of that is lost. So no, I think that's actually, when you're doing your other training with the muscle memory stuff on that needs to be in there too, because part of this is the mental game of making the right choices and knowing that other people won't, then what can you do?